All right. All right. Let's start. This is part 2. All right. So last week we started. Igor, you got to put that one up. You put that one up. Yeah. Part 1. All right. So I don't want to go through it obviously, but last week we talked about the basic structure of the tefillot on Rosh Hashanah. Okay. So we went through the basic stuff that we say all the time and how it's different on Rosh Hashanah. And then we went through the additional stuff. So I'm not going to go through all that again, obviously.
I was just going to ask you for a favor.
Yeah.
That if you, Rabbi, if you could just go fast.
Fast?
That was just the fastest tefillot. That was the main thing that I thought we were going to do today. Because I couldn't make it last week.
The special tefillot of Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, could you go fast? Just fast.
You want me to talk fast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fast. Because that was important to me. I kept asking a lot of questions last year, 2 years ago. Why?
Okay. All right.
Just fast. That's all.
Okay. All right.
There's only two of us. And,
all right. So, all right. So there's three major additions that we add to the tefillot of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, which are called malchiot, zichronot, and shofrot. Okay, which means kingship, remembrance, and shofar. Okay, so the three themes, and then we don't say this any other time of the year, only on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, the three themes are that Hashem is the king.
Yeah.
Okay, meaning these are the major themes of Rosh Hashanah. People a lot of times don't realize it. Hashem is the king. Hashem remembers everything, and the way we symbolize all that is the shofar. Okay. I'll read you what the Gemara has to say about this. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Imru lefanai b'Rosh Hashanah. Hashem says, say to me on Rosh Hashanah, Malchiot, Zichronot, v'Shofrot, kingship, remembrance, and shofar. Malchiot k'dei shetamlichuni aleichem. The Malchiot is so that you should make me the king. Zichronot k'dei sheyavo lefanai zichronechem latova. Remembrance is so that I'll remember the good things about you. Ubameh, and how do we do all this? B'shofar. Okay, so that's the way the Gemara puts it. We're going to expand on what exactly this means. Okay, so we always know Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment, right? It's the day of judgment when God goes through our year and He judges us for the next year, etc. But there's another element of Rosh Hashanah, which is that God is the king. Okay, and we're acknowledging that God is the king. So that's what and of course the main symbol of Rosh Hashanah, the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah, is the shofar. So we do all this, the way we really give it power is the blowing of the shofar. Okay, so those are the three themes that we're going to talk about. Now, I want to go through a few details that the Gemara discusses, which is, first of all, when do we put these in the davening? Okay, how do we get them in the davening, right? Because you're not going to just get up randomly and say the three things. You got to put them somewhere. So we put them in Shmona Esrei, and we put them in the Shmona Esrei of Musaf. Okay, so that's why if you look at, again, I explained this last week, but I'll just repeat this. This is a key point. The machzor, I think this is what Leon's saying, the machzor of Rosh Hashanah seems so complicated when you look at it. It seems like crazy, like there's stuff flying everywhere, right? All the prayers are all over the place. But when you really differentiate what's going on in the prayers, so you see that it's not that complicated. It really makes perfect sense. Okay, and what it is there's every Shmona Esrei has to have the same three blessings at the beginning and the same three at the end. And then in the middle, it depends on what type of day it is, right? If it's Shabbat, if it's a holiday, if it's a weekday. So that's all we're doing basically in the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur davening. We're saying those first three blessings, the last three blessings, but the third blessing on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is expanded. So it has all sorts of additional stuff. And the ending is different. So instead of Hakel HaKadosh, it's HaMelech HaKadosh. Okay, so that's why it seems like it's totally different, but it's not really. It's really the same structure. Okay, and then in the middle, it's also very much the same as we do on a regular day. So in the Musaf, we have only one blessing in the middle. There's only 7 blessings. 3 in the beginning, 3 in the end, 1 in the middle. Okay, that's called Kedushat Hayom, where we talk about the day of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, now, in Kedushat Hayom, we add the 3 themes of Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofar. Okay, so that's why it seems like it's so much, but this is all one blessing that we're adding these 3 themes into it. Okay, Now, that's the first. I'm going to go through 3 points over here, okay? I can even tell you what they are in advance. Where do we put them in? Okay, what, like, how do we do them? Okay, I mean, we said this all briefly last week, which is that there's 10 verses that you say for each of them. Okay, but we'll expand on a little bit of that. And then what types of verses are we saying? Okay, so we're going to go through those 3 things. So let me start. I want to start. There's a very interesting debate. In other words, we have a machzor that's set, right? So we know exactly where everything should be, what to say. We just read it from the book. But obviously, 2,000-3,000 years ago, it wasn't so set, right? There were different traditions about how to say it. So there were different traditions about where to insert the malchiot, zechronot, and shofrot, okay? And the reason I want to read this to you is because what I want to see now is how it's connected with the shofar. This is a very key point. Okay, these are not independent of the shofar. The shofar is the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah, so we need to connect the prayers of Rosh Hashanah with the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, and again, these are the special prayers of Rosh Hashanah. All the prayers on Rosh Hashanah are special and important, obviously, right? And a lot of them are unique to the day. But these are the prayers that most define, so to speak, what's going on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so the Mishnah quotes 2 views about how to do this. Okay, the first view is that we say the first 3 blessings. Okay, the first 3 blessings of the Shemona Esrei, of Musaf. And then in the 3rd blessing, we add Malchiot. We add the kings. Okay? Okay. Then we go to the 4th blessing, which is Kedushat Hayom. And we say, and then we blow the shofar. Okay, now again. Okay. This might sound a little complicated. There's 3 times that we blow the shofar during Musaf. Okay, there's 3 blowings. There's 2 major blowings of the shofar. One is before Musaf. One is during Musaf, and the one during Musaf is divided into 3 smaller blowings. Okay, so there's 3 blowings. There are some synagogues that do. There's some synagogues that do a double blowing. Let me talk about that in a minute.
This Musaf is for Rosh Hashanah?
Rosh Hashanah Musaf, yeah, Rosh Hashanah Musaf. Okay. So according to the first view of the Mishnah, you say the first 3 blessings, and in the 3rd blessing you say Malchiot, that God is the king. Then you go to the 4th blessing, you say Kedushat Hayom, that it's Rosh Hashanah, and then you blow. Then you say Zechronot, that God remembers, and you blow. And then you say Shofrot, and you blow. And then you finish the next 3 blessings. Okay, that's the view of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Akiva disagrees with him, and this is what's interesting. Rabbi Akiva says it can't be, because the problem with that is that you're not blowing for Malchiot. Right? Okay, if it's a little confusing, that's okay. The key point that I want to bring out from this is that Rabbi Akiva is saying that you have to blow the shofar connected with each of these things. So when you say Malchiot, you have to blow the shofar. When you say Zechrono, you have to blow the shofar. When you say Shofar, you have to blow the shofar. You can't say them without the shofar. So this is a very, very important idea, on Rosh Hashanah, that the prayers... so it's not, the shofar is not just a mitzvah, right? Like sometimes, let's say we have a mitzvah to, I don't know, I'm trying to think, all the mitzvot in my head are the holiday mitzvah, right? Let's say we have a mitzvah to eat kosher, right? You don't have to say prayers with the mitzvah to eat kosher. It's 2 separate things. But the shofar is a mitzvah that's connected with the prayer, so it has to be blown with the prayers. So what does Rabbi Akiva say to do? So he says to do what we do, okay? This is what we do, according to Rabbi Akiva. We say the first 3 blessings, finish. Then we say the 4th blessing. And in the 4th blessing, we include Malchiot, then blow the shofar. Zechronot, then blow the shofar. And then Shofrot, the shofar, and then blow the shofar. Okay, so each of these 3 things has a shofar, and then we finish the Shemona Esrei. Now, the issue that happened was, when do you blow the shofar? Because we have 2 Shemona Esreis, really, right? There's one that everybody says privately. And then there's one that the Chazan says publicly for everyone, right?
At the same time. Well, I'm saying it silently, but then I'm finished, and then he goes back.
Says it. Right.
That's what he's talking about.
Yeah, so the repetition.
Okay, so that's the 2. Okay.
Yeah. So when do you blow the shofar? In the private one, or in the repetition, the communal one? So there's benefits to both, right? And the private one makes more sense because you're connecting it with each person's prayers. Problem is that it gets very confusing, right? One guy davens for a half hour, one guy davens for an hour. It could get very confusing. Okay, so because of that, many shuls put it over into when the chazan blows, like when the chazan says it, and then they blow. Okay, but there's different customs. Some shuls will do it.
We do it within the private one.
Yeah, you do it in the private one. Some shuls even do it both. Okay, so there's different customs how to do this. But the point is, but the main thing is you must blow at least during one of them in the Musaf prayer. Okay, so by the time you end Musaf, you have heard, first of all, the blowing of the shofar before Musaf, okay, it's called 30 sounds, okay, which next week hopefully we'll talk more about the blowing of the shofar, but it's called 30 sounds, okay, so you do 30 before Musaf, and then you do 30 during Musaf, 10 with each of them. Okay, so that's the first thing that I want to talk about with this Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofar. Okay, so it's a very, very powerful, very beautiful prayer. Okay, so now we know where it goes and what's the basic point. So how do you do this prayer? Okay, how do you do Malchiot? How do you do Zichronot? How do you do Shofar? So there is the basic way to do this, and again, I mentioned this last week, but okay, I want to go through this a little more. The basic way to do this is that you say 10 Pisukim in each of the Malchiot, the Zichronot, and the Shofar. So you say 10 Pesukim that relate to God being the king. 10 Pesukim that talk about God remembering. 10 Pesukim that talk about blowing the power of the Shofar. And these Pesukim have to come from the 3 sections of the Tanakh. Okay, so in the Tanakh, right, the Bible has 3 sections. The Torah, the prophets, the 5 books of Moshe, the prophets, and the writings, the Ketuvim. So you select 3 from each of them. So you get to 9, and then you add 1 from the Torah. So again, if you look in the Machzor, you'll see a lot of writing and a lot of this and that, but the main thing that we're doing at that Musaf is the 10 Pesukim, 3 from the Torah, 3 from the prophets, 3 from the writings, and then 1 from the Torah. So there's 30 Pesukim basically. Now, this also is a debate, okay? So the same rabbi that I mentioned before, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he says that there's only 3. Okay, so there's a debate, 3,000 years ago there was a debate. Do you do this, maybe 2,000 years ago, whatever it was, do you do this with 10 Pesukim or 3 Pesukim? Now, what's the significance of these numbers? Okay, what's the point of all these numbers? So the Gemara explains that there's a few different options over here. Okay, the 10. What do you think 10 is? 10 should be easy.
10 Commandments.
Good. 10 Commandments is one option. There's 3 explanations for 10. All right, the 10 Commandments is one of them. Okay, so the 10 Psukim reflect the 10 Commandments. Another option is that there's a tradition that God created the world with 10 utterances. Okay, there are 10 sayings that created the world. So that's another way, right? The 10 Psukim reflect the 10 things that God said. And the last option is that in the paragraph of Ashrei, okay, the famous one, there's 10 times that David HaMelech praises God. Okay, so that's where the number 10 comes from. Where do you think the number 3 comes from? Because this also
Ashrei Yoshev Betecha? Ashrei?
Yeah, but it's not that paragraph. That's like the first verse, but we take it from another one, and then when you go through that verse, there's 10. Okay, what do you think 3 is?
3 fathers.
Okay, good. That's that. Okay, 3 fathers. The Gemara actually does not say that, but that would be a good one. All right, the 3 Avot, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, doesn't say that one. There's 2 others. Okay, one is Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim, right? Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. That's one. And the other one is the Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, right? The Torah, prophets, and writings. So the 3 sections of the Tanakh. All right, so those are the 3. Okay, so that's the way that we choose to commemorate these types of things. It's interesting because this year the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbat, so there isn't a shofar that day. So that day we're not going to have the symbol of the shofar with us in the davening. It's just going to be these psukim that are sort of going to be defining the day, right? Which is a very interesting concept.
That's the whole Agudah shel Rosh Hashanah. That's the whole feeling. The shofar. That's what everybody's waiting for.
Yeah. All right. Well, this year you got to wait for the second day.
Right.
There were times in Israel there were groups in Israel. They do 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, the only holiday they do 2 of. But there were some people, at least or groups at times, that only did 1. So you could miss the whole shofar for a year. Unbelievable. Okay, now let's go to the next issue, which is also an interesting issue. I mean, there's other issues over here to talk about, but you can't just go through. Now, this is not an issue for us, but the question is, which psukim can you use? Okay, we explained where to do this and how to do it, but which psukim do you use? So theoretically, you could sit down with the Tanakh and find your favorite psukim and put them in there. All right, there's nothing. I mean, that's theoretically. I don't know. I assume 2,000 years ago there must have been people or even communities where people sat down with the Tanakh. They figured out their favorite 10, with the ones that were meaningful for them, and that was the ones that they said. Right? It's in certain ways it's like a very powerful idea, right? Can you imagine sort of writing your own davening for Rosh Hashanah? Right? It's an amazing way to prepare for Rosh Hashanah, to actually come up with the text of what you're going to say. But okay, that was back in the day. There was a lot more flexibility what people would say and the davening that they would insert. But over the years, it became much more rigid. Okay, so we don't have that kind of flexibility, and the reason is very simple, because people lost that kind of language skills. Right? People didn't have the same grammar, the same knowledge of Hebrew. People that just didn't have the same ability to communicate. So things became more and more and more rigid, and eventually we have the Siddur. Once the printing press comes, so then that's really, that's the end of it. Now you have the Siddur, and everything gets printed, and everything gets uniform. Uniform. I mean, obviously there's Sephardim, there's Ashkenaz, and there's different customs, but everything's very, very uniform in terms of that. Okay. So now, but let's imagine. Let's go. So okay. So that's what I was saying. This is no issue for us, right? None of us are writing our own prayer. If you are, you shouldn't be, right? No one should be writing their own prayers for Rosh Hashanah. You select the custom of your community and just say it. That's it. Okay, but what happens in the olden days if you are writing your own psukim? Okay, so there's a few rules over here. Ein mazkirin shel puran ut. You can't just use any verse that talks about God being the king or that talks about the shofar or stuff like that. You can't use something which is going to be negative. Okay, so it has to be a positive. It has to have a positive meaning. It's interesting. Some of the verses, I should have brought them up. Okay, some of the verses that we say have things that sound. If you're reading the Shemona Esrei, if you're praying on Rosh Hashanah and it sounds like it's something a little bit negative, then that's you got to figure out. I mean, don't you say it, but it shouldn't be negative, right? Maybe at the end of the pasuk it gets more positive or something. Okay, now there is another debate over here, which is also an interesting debate, which is there are certain psukim that imply something, but they might not use the word explicitly, right? It's like a pasuk indicates something, but it doesn't say it explicitly. So is that sufficient to be considered one of the psukim? Okay, in other words, if it's implied, but it doesn't use the word, let's say a melech, it doesn't say that God is the king, but it implies it. So that's a debate. Again, if you look in our machzorim, it's going to identify the psukim that are appropriate and the psukim that should be used. All right, so okay, those are some of the issues around this. Any questions about any of that?
I got a question, but not even related to what you were saying.
Okay, shoot.
No, it's very fast.
Yeah.
I was brought up Ashkenazi style.
Yeah.
Now I've been converted into Mizrahi.
Yeah.
Okay, but I see the difference. Now, why should it be, because it's a halacha or it's not halacha, that I'm going to ask you? Why about 15 times per davening we open the Torah? We open the doors to the Torah, where the Mizrahim don't do it.
Okay.
What is the reason for it?
Okay.
That the Mizrahim do not follow it.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So okay, this is it's not halacha. That's the answer. It's a custom, but I'll explain to you why it's even more. Why it's even more different, because basically, okay. So far, we're talking about the stuff from the times of the Gemara. Okay, so you're talking about this is like 2,000 years ago. After that, people kept adding to the Siddur, but those they were poems. They're important stuff, but they don't have the same status as the halacha. But not only do they not have the same status, it also depended on where you lived. So the Gemara is the last time when the Jewish people were really totally unified. After that, they split. There were Jews in the Sephardic areas and the Mizrahi areas and the in Eastern Europe. That's when the Jews split. It's only in very recent times, the last few decades, that the Jews are all in communication again. Because if you had a guy in Poland and a guy in Iran, they didn't have communication. So from the end of the Gemara until, again, very, very recently, I mean, obviously once the State of Israel was built, so everyone was unified around that again. But when there was no communication and the Jews were living all over, there was a real split. And so now, if you had a poet that wrote a great poem, right, a beautiful poem, in, Italy, so that poem might get accepted in communities in Europe, but not in communities in, Asia and the Middle East. Okay, so that's how you end up with, that's where a lot of the differences between the Machzorim come, between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim. It's not so much in the old material, I mean, it's a little bit there, but it's a big differences in the later stuff. So when we open the Aron, that's what you're talking about specifically.
Why are we opening the Aron?
So, but that's related almost.
It was really two questions, but you said
but
one. Now is our Ashkenazi. Why do we open it?
Oh, so that's just related to some of the poems. Usually, there's some poems. Oh, the reason for the custom of opening the Aron is that there was a certain tradition to daven in the Aron. I don't know. That was just people had a certain tradition. They thought it was like a way to make their prayers more powerful. Like there's stories that someone would get sick and their relatives would like come into the shul, open the Aron, and just start praying.
Oh, so
like out of the
Okay,
so that was considered like a certain power to the prayers. But most of those are related to the later.
So every Ashkenazi, no matter where in Europe, has followed it.
No, I'm sure.
No,
I'm sure there's Ashkenazim that don't. I'm trying to remember. I used to pray somewhere where they barely opened it. If like
in Israel, in Yerushalayim, where I prayed in Rosh Hashanah, they didn't do it.
Was it Ashkenazi or Sephardi?
There, and all of a sudden I come back.
Was it Ashkenazi or Sephardi?
By me?
Was it Sephardi or Ashkenazi?
Ashkenazi.
Oh, it was Ashkenazi. Yeah, I used to daven in a German shul that had a lot of the German customs, and I feel like they didn't. I'm not sure if they opened it. I don't know. No, I don't think all Ashkenazim do it. It depends. It really depends.
Okay.
Even amongst Ashkenazim, you have the Germans, the Italians.
The real reason why it's like the neshama. The neshama is coming in.
I mean, I'm sure there's reasons, but yeah. Anyways, okay, all right. So that's we did a good amount about the davening. Next week, what I would like to hopefully we'll talk about the shofar. All right, just some stuff like that. I mean, it's almost here. It's.
I've got a shofar home. I'll bring it home and I'll let him do it.
Yeah. Maybe we'll even talk about why we don't blow it on Shabbat. All right, we'll see. But all right, there's only All right.
Yeah.
Anyways, thanks everyone, and
have
a great week preparing for Rosh Hashanah.
Till next week.
Mm-hmm.